welcome everyone to Working People, a podcast about the lives, jobs, dreams, and struggles of the working class today. Working People is a proud member of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and is brought to you in partnership with In These Times magazine and the Real News Network. This show is produced by Jules Taylor and made possible by the support of listeners like you. My name is Maximilian Alvarez, and as promised, we are back with our regular programming, and we've got a lot of important new episodes coming your way. And today, we are going back to the front lines of the MAGA right's all-out assault on free speech, higher education, and the people who live, work, and study there. And we are speaking today with Tom Alter, a tenured history professor at Texas State University who has become a target of that assault and has had his life turned upside down because of it over the past month. As scholar and author Bill Mullen recently wrote in Jacobin, quote, "In Texas, a socialist professor is now in the fight of his life against MAGA's new McCarthyism." Tom Alter, a labor historian and tenured professor of history at Texas State University, was fired from his job on September 10th after a far-right troll doctored a videotape of Alter speaking at a virtual revolutionary socialism conference. After viewing the video, University President Kelly Damphouse fired Alter on September 10th with what Alter and his supporters say was no due process. In his conference talk, Alter called for independent working-class political action and the need for working-class people to organize in a socialist party. In his remarks, Alter also explicitly criticized tactics like spontaneous violence, sometimes associated with anarchist groups. Yet the right-wing activist doctored the video to make it appear that Alter was in fact endorsing those tactics. A wide-scale grassroots campaign for Alter led by unions, students, and activists won a significant but temporary victory on September 26th when a judge ordered Alter temporarily reinstated. But the fight is not over. Under the reinstatement, Alter is not allowed to teach classes. The university will now begin a formal process that could result in Alter being fired permanently, end quote. Now, unlike far-right and outright fascist propaganda machines from influencer channels like those of Carolyn Borisenko and Laura Loomer to Fox News itself, we don't rely on lies, doctored footage, and doxing to make our point. They do. So we bring you the real news, and we are committed to the actual, no bullshit truth. So in that spirit, we're actually going to play an extended, uninterrupted clip of Professor Alter's speech for you right now so you can hear it for yourself. And we have linked to a video of the full speech in the show notes for this episode if you want to listen to the whole thing. But for right now, take a listen to this extended clip.
I'll just say it again. My name is Tom Alter. I'm a member of Socialist Horizon in San Marcos, Texas, and also a member of the Texas State Employees Union, affiliated with the CWA. So, as many of the speakers and participants in this conference have stated, U.S. capitalism is in crisis, a crisis faced also by capitalists and nations across the earth. Capitalists' unquenchable thirst for profit has led them to attack workers' standards of living at home and put them in conflict with rival capitalists abroad. The working class in the United States feels this in our daily lives. The high price of groceries, soaring rents and mortgages, lack of health care, crumbling public infrastructure, an education system that, despite the efforts of teachers, serves more as daycare for workers' children than fostering learning, and environmental destruction. All these conditions contribute to a growing mental health crisis. Globally, we see U.S. capital coming into increasingly conflict with rival imperialist powers, also seeking to maintain their profits, not just by exploiting the working class they rule over, but by seeking additional markets, resources, and labor pools beyond their national borders. Crisis is a regular feature of capitalism. What makes the current crisis an extra problem for capitalists is the willingness of people to fight back. You could argue that we have been in a prolonged period of resistance. dating back to December of 2010 with the overlapping protests of the pro-democracy movement of the Arab Spring, the Wisconsin protest of 2011 going into Occupy Wall Street, the 2012 Chicago Teachers Union strike, followed by more teacher strikes across the country, the Indigenous Peoples fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline, Black Lives Matter, trans liberation, Cop City, the protest against it, and a general uptick in labor union struggles. We see this resistance currently in the hotel workers on strike in Houston, the United Auto Workers on strike against GE Aerospace in Ohio, and the ongoing resistance of the Palestinian people. Through these struggles, more and more people see capitalism to blame and are open to socialist ideas. Despite the continued resistance of working people in confronting racism, sexism, transphobia, and increasing wealth inequality, the basic underpinnings of capitalism have not been broken. And facing the crisis of capitalism, what the working class is dealing with is a crisis of organization and confidence. While there is a willingness to fight, knowing the most effective ways to fight and having confidence in ourselves and the working class as a whole is vital. Using a democratic ballot line, you are being used to provide left cover for a party of mass incarceration at home and genocide abroad. Seeing the limits and pitfalls of electoral politics, some socialists have turned to more local community-based projects engaging in what they call mutual aid. Mutual aid has a long tradition within the labor movement when workers, primarily in unions, assisted fellow members while sick and pain and helping pay for funerals. However, what most activists today are calling mutual aid is actually charity. This is seen in food drives, disaster assistance, and blankets for the homeless. This is all noble work, and I will never discourage someone from helping those in need. But charity cloaked as mutual aid is not going to end capitalism. Another strain of anarchism gaining ground recently is that of insurrectionary anarchism, primarily coming out of those that were involved in the Cop City protest. These groups and individuals have grown rightfully frustrated with symbolic protests that do not disrupt the normal functioning of government and business. They call for more direct action and shutting down the military-industrial complex and preventing ICE from kidnapping members of their communities. Many insurrectionary anarchists are also serving jail time, lost jobs, and face expulsion from school. They have truly put their bodies on the line. While their actions are laudable, it should be asked to what purpose do they serve? As anarchists, these insurrectionists explicitly reject the formation of a revolutionary party capable of leading the working class to power. Without organization, how can anyone expect to overthrow the most bloodthirsty, profit-driven mad organization in the history of the world, that of the U.S. government?
2 minutes, comrade.
Thank you. So, as Steve mentioned, a revolutionary party needs a revolutionary situation for the working class to win power. We are not in that situation now, though it may be coming soon, as the crisis of capitalism only continues to deepen and capitalists look to war and fascism to save their profit system. If we do not build a revolutionary party now, this is surely our future. What we do now is incredibly important. We must educate ourselves and others in Marxism and the history of class struggle. We are by no means just a reading club. Our tasks are laid out in the Communist Manifesto. We must participate in the struggles of our class, whatever they may be, from joining union picket lines to defending trans people. And then, as communists, connect these numerous struggles of our class into a fight against the source of our oppression, capitalism. Through struggle, we can win reforms along the way, giving confidence to our class. This is how we build a mass party. Reforms are not enough, though. If the working class is not in power, those reforms can be lost, as we have seen in recent times. We must build a revolutionary socialist party now, so that when a revolutionary situation arises, the working class has the tools and organization it needs to take power. To conclude, have confidence, build workers' power, be a firebrand for a socialist horizon. Thank you.
Now, again, you can watch Professor Tom Alter's full speech using the link that we provided in the show notes. But right now, here on Working People and the Real News Network, we're going to talk to Professor Alter himself. Professor, thank you so much for joining me today, especially with everything going on in your life right now. I want to start with how you and your family are doing at this moment and where things actually stand in your case as of this conversation, which we're recording on Saturday, October 11th.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on your show. Yeah, for how this has been for my family, as you can imagine, it's been quite jarring, turning our world upside down. We made a home for ourselves in the community here of San Marcos, Texas. That's just right in between Austin and San Antonio. My wife has longer roots going back to this community. So finding out just unceremoniously that my immediate termination through online posting through the university president has been quite disrupting to my family. I've got a daughter in high school and a son in middle school. So it's been really turning our world upside down. Where things stand, so I was reinstated on the 26th through a court-ordered district judge. They saw that I was fired with no due process. And so now the university is starting that process. But this process is very much controlled by the university president. There's very little faculty co-governance, and the president has the ultimate authority. He had a hearing this past Monday, on October 6th, where he heard that they were still charging me with saying they had grounds for my immediate termination, saying I was engaging in partisan political activity. That's the latest charge against me. They've been switching it as they go along. Initially, it was inciting violence, and then I was a danger to the public health and safety of the Texas State community, which is ludicrous. I mean, I have family here. I would do nothing that would endanger the health and safety of this community that we love here in Central Texas. And so now saying that engaging in partisan political activity, but that largely refers to someone engaged if a faculty member is running for office. That I'm not doing. So we had the hearing on Monday. He said he'd have a decision by the end of the week. But as you said, here we are on Saturday, and I've heard nothing. And so you can say that's unprofessional at the very least, that here he supposed to have a decision by the end of the week, but we've heard nothing.
Yeah, just to break the fourth wall here for a second, like we scheduled this interview for today expecting that you would actually have the promised news from your university.
Yes.
And the news upon which your entire life and your family's life is hanging. And they just said, no, we're going to keep you waiting a little bit longer. We're going to keep you in limbo. Like, that's insane.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, just personalizing a little bit. I mean, there's a broader political fight, but yes, there is this personal aspect to it as well. I mean, I've got my 11-year-old son every day when I'm picking up for school saying, hey, Dad, you still have your job? Do we have to move? And so there's that real human aspect of it as well. And just radio silence from them. I mean, so there's an aspect of cruelty to this as well, besides unprofessionalism.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's given everything you've been going through, I would say that's putting it as mildly as one can possibly put it. But let's give listeners more of a sense of just what exactly you have been going through and like how your case has become this flashpoint of, you know, the new MAGA rights all out assault on higher education, free speech, academic freedom, workers' rights. Like all of that is wrapped up in your case among so many others that we're seeing in the world of higher ed right now. And that became explicitly clear on the day of your firing, which was, of course, also the day that Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA, was assassinated in Utah. And so, we want to be clear that like those two things happen on the same day. So I think first and foremost, some people have sort of maybe jumped to the conclusion that you were a casualty of that initial wave of repression after Kirk's assassination. But of course, the events, leading to your firing predate that. And so I wanted to ask, just to sort of lay things out for folks, if you could walk us through the timeline of events here from, you speaking at this conference to now.
Yes. So I spoke at a revolutionary socialism conference it was a 2-day online conference, again, on Saturday, September 6th. My particular talk as part of this revolutionary socialism conference was on a Sunday morning, my time in Central Texas. I gave the talk on my own time, from my home office here in San Marcos. Again, on a Sunday morning through Zoom. My particular session that I was speaking on was building revolutionary organization today. This is a question that much of us on the left are grappling with. How do we organize ourselves in the face of all these attacks that are occurring on working class people? And a question of organization is very key. Again, how are we going to fight back? So I gave the talk. It was, again, building revolutionary organization. I was critiquing different forms of organizing, whether that be kind of more top-down socialism, working within the Democratic Party, and also critiquing some forms of anarchist type of organizing. Gave the talk, didn't identify myself as part of Texas State University in any way. I mean, I was doing it in my own private capacity, again, from my free time, from my home via Zoom, not on campus. It did come out later on during a break session of the conference because there were different sessions that were occurring. Someone that knew me, recognized me from a previous conference, asked me what it was like teaching at Texas State. Again, this was during the break, not during the conference session, not during the Q&A or the conference wrap up. So that came out then that I was employed at Texas State University. Well, unbeknownst to myself and conference organizers, this kind of wannabe social media grifter, self-described fascist, Borisenko, filmed my conference talk and then edited that section of where I was asked during the break about me being at Texas State to make it seem like that was during the conference talk. And so here then she's like, hey, look, here's this Texas State University professor advocating for overthrowing the government. And the campaign started on Monday, the day after I talked on a Sunday morning. We were, myself and other people that participated in the conference, were aware of this online campaign, but we decided just not to give it any air. It wasn't getting many views. After all, this is a self-described fascist, a horribly anti-Semitic person who said that Jews chose to die in the Holocaust and Hitler went to heaven, has even said that child rape in some instances is okay. So it's this person is just, who's going to listen to this person? Self-described fascist, calls herself an anti-communist cult leader. So it's who's going to listen to this person with this doctored video of me at this conference? Well, turns out a few days later, the Texas State University president, Kelly Dampus, appears to have listened to it. I was at my son's soccer practice. All of a sudden, I received a group text from local San Marcos community activists. I'm involved in different activism in my local community, again, in my own private capacity, not as a professor at Texas State University. And they were calling for an emergency meeting to defend me. And I was thinking, never mind that online fascist. It's no big deal. And then they saw the announcement that I had been summarily terminated for inciting violence and that I was a danger to the health and safety of the Texas State community. And that just threw things for a loop because this was without due process. I was a tenured professor. Tenure is something that takes about 6 years to earn, and it's a form of a contract. I mean, it's meant that you have academic freedom, and tenure it's not a guaranteed job for life. I mean, you can be fired, but there is a process, and this process was not followed whatsoever. So it was very jarring to numerous types of people. I mean, those concerned with free speech and academic freedom, concerns with due process, and also tenure. I mean, if you get into the academic world. And so this immediately became, it's like a flashpoint for all different numerous people that have concerned about academic freedom, free speech, democratic rights, and union rights as well. It was my unions that came immediately to my defense, the Texas State Employees Union, which is affiliated with the Communication Workers of America nationally. The union represents all state employees of the state of Texas. And also I'm a member of the American Association of University Professors. So it's really been a great partnership with the two unions working together. The AAUP has provided a lawyer, and the Texas State Employees Union has its roots in East Texas as a civil rights and economic justice union. So I've kind of got the ground game, got with the grassroots activist union, and then the AAUP with all of its connections and different resources to provide the lawyer. But foremost, it's been the students at Texas State University. I was fired on a Wednesday night, and Thursday morning, they were out protesting, like spontaneous protesting. So that, I mean, and they protested for 5 days straight. There were 5 school days straight. There was a weekend involved. There were not many people on campus. So for 5 school days straight, students protested on campus. And then the internal organizing began. Academic associations have all the major historical academic associations have sent in letters of support, denouncing the actions of President Dampus and my termination without any due process, as well as not honoring academic freedom.
And then all of that, temporarily culminating in your reinstatement at the end of the month, correct?
Correct. Yes. So a judge, I believe correctly ruled that my due process had been violated, had not been honored. The process that Texas State University's own policies to go through removal of a tenured faculty member, and as well as state law. A couple years ago, the Texas legislature passed what should rightly be seen as an anti-tenure law, because state governments should not be the place where tenure is determined. It should be universities. So there was a state law put into effect, which basically is very similar to the policies that Texas State had. And they didn't even honor that. So Texas State policy was violated. State law was violated. And then, of course, federal constitutional rights were violated as well. And so the judge, seeing that the due process was violated, ordered my reinstatement, but that wasn't reinstatement back into the classroom. I still don't have access to my email. I still don't have to my Texas State email, don't have access to my office. And so I've just been totally cut off. So I've been reinstated back on the payroll, healthcare for my family to get personal things that are very important for people just getting by, the paycheck by paycheck. Healthcare is extremely important to have that. There's many working people's working without healthcare. It's not a good situation to be in. So I've got reinstated back on the payroll for now. And then but then since they began the hearing process now, and we're waiting to see what happens next.
Well, and none of this, of course, is happening in a vacuum, right? We're having our conversation just days after the kind of tense, terrifying saga of Professor Mark Bray and his family fleeing the country. That is a journalistically and factually accurate description of what Professor Bray and his family just went through this week, needing to flee the country because Bray has written, books, scholarly books, articles, given talks on the history of anti-fascism, which is apparently, cause for being doxxed, vilified, fired, chased out of the country, all manner of things that people are calling for. And this is serious stuff. This is people's addresses being posted online, visible to people who are explicitly calling for violence against them, death upon them. Like, I mean, this isn't just your average online mudslinging.
Yeah.
So this is really serious stuff, and I wanted to ask, like, if we could kind of put your case in the battle over, the battle that you've been fighting with your unions, with AAUP, with the university, with the students helping. Like, all of that is happening at a time when the pressure is mounting from the Trump administration on down, right, to go all out on higher education and root out, this quote unquote leftist scourge, this anti-American scourge on campuses. So, like, I wanted to ask, like, taking your corner of higher ed right now, like, what has the past month taught you about where we are in this country?
Yeah, these assaults on higher education and free speech and democratic rights have been ongoing for a few years. We saw it with students protesting for ending the genocide and for a free Palestine. You had the crackdown that began under the Biden administration. But what we are seeing now in this past month, you could say, is almost like an all-out assault. I don't think necessarily it's something we were expecting. People knew that the second Trump administration was going to be bad, but just how quickly this assault has come on so many fronts, I think has been jarring, even though there's been lots of great response back and fight back. I think even when we look back on the civil rights movement, and we look back at very large historic events of the labor movement, it's hard to say if people knew, like, at that time, they knew they were in the midst of something big that was happening. Because you're just in the moment. You're dealing with what's happening. You're just responding to what's in front of you. We are very much in one of those moments now. History has been thrust upon us rather quickly. And so we see this assault that's happening on higher education and universities. Universities are, with all their flaws, I mean, we can get into critiquing like what's happened to universities and the business models that they have followed kind of in recent decades, the incredible amount of student debt that working people have to get into just to try to get a college education. But still, universities are one of those, a basic institution of a democratic society. They're kind of those like classical liberal institution, meaning like the full kind of gamut of free speech, freedom of the press, where you can have debate and have ideas. They're not indoctrinating institution. It's where you go to discuss and innovate and debate and have ideas and have the free exchange of ideas. And when you then attack that and underrode the foundations of kind of these like kind of basic kind of liberal institutions where it's supposed to be open discussion and debate, you're really eroding the foundations of a democratic society as a whole. I mean, this is where it began in Italy in the 1920s. I mean, you go after the universities, and then you go after the unions. We've seen an ongoing attack on the unions. And so if we lose this space of openness and debate and diversity and dialogue, we're going to lose a lot. I mean, we have other spaces than universities. Of course, we're having a discussion right now. I mean, we're using our free speech, freedom of the press right now. But when you lose places like especially public universities, I mean, it says a lot about what's happening and what's coming. And that's why I think so many people have come to my defense and the defense of other professors that are under attack across the country, because they see this as not an attack on an individual professor, even though, of course, it affects us as individuals, but they see this as a broader assault on democratic rights. And that's why I've seen like so many like organization, trade unions, free speech activists, academic organizations coming to rallying around this fight. And like I said, we've seen it all over. I mean, it's the University of North Carolina, University of South Dakota, the Rutgers professor, Michael Bray. I mean, like literally having to leave the country for fearing his family's safety. And for what? For writing about fascism and anti-fascist politics. This is something what I teach in my classroom when we get to World War II. And I'd show a picture of Mussolini hanging upside down. And this was not controversial. It was kind of an accepted, basic American ideology was anti-fascist. There was a whole generation that went to World War II to go fight fascist.
I have a poster in my office of Donald Duck throwing a tomato in Hitler's face. Like,
yes.
There was a whole American campaign of fuck fascism.
Yes. Yes, this used to unite all Americans, from conservatives all the way to anarchists. I mean, the whole left, except for the fascists themselves. But otherwise, this is something that united all Americans. Now, all of a sudden, being anti-fascist is controversial. Someone has to flee the country with his family because they're anti-fascist. I mean, that says a lot right there. We used to be like, yes, Democrat, Republican, independent, libertarian. I mean, even Marxist. I mean, socialist, anarchist, communist. That's like being anti-fascist was like the one thing that united us all. And now we actually have the defense of fascists, where fascists are able to get a professor fired. That you don't have universities like immune to an online fascist grifter. That's frightening. That's what we were thinking. It was like, okay, this is just some online unhinged person. You should be safe. I mean, it's what? Yeah, is a university really going to listen to that? Well, here they have. And then here, what's happened at Rutgers, where it's like, okay, he's just teaching an anti-fascist tradition. I mean, in some way, not supposed to be any more American than that, at least recent American history. Shouldn't be any more American than that. And yet here, you have Turning Point USA is able to largely forced to flee for their own safety. And then like what's happened to myself and others across the country, students as well. Yeah.
And, again, it needs to be said because it's true.
Yeah.
That, like, this is what Turning Point USA is and always has been. Like, I mean, I remember talking to TPUSA, young TPUSA organizers, on the campuses of like University of Michigan and other campuses that I would go to when I was a graduate student during the first Trump administration. What everybody knew about TPUSA was that like they were not defenders of free speech and open debate and conservative values. They were a mercenary operation designed to intimidate and dox, professors that they thought were ideologically biased, and hence the tip of the spear of TPUSA when I was still on college campuses was the professor watch list. And, you had this sort of kind of half grassroots, half astroturfed effort where, you would have students going into classes, videotaping professors without their consent, and then doing what happened to you, Tom, where, like you get these sort of, selective clips or doctored videos that then, make their way through the right-wing outrage machine. Like maybe something would get picked up by Breitbart, then maybe it would get picked up by Fox News, and then like, the outrage machine would be in full force. And, I knew plenty of people who were subject to this and had their identities, revealed, their addresses posted online, death threats, attempted firings, successful firings. Like you said, none of that is actually new, but it is very much gained a terrifyingly new power behind it from the Trump administration on down. So we're very much seeing a 2.0 version of, something that was already there out in the open. And so I don't think anyone in this country, whatever your ideological, makeup is, no one has the ability to pretend that like that isn't on the historical record. This isn't what, TPUSA and its acolytes have been trying to do openly for years. So I want to make that point very, very clear. But I also want to within that, I want to try to, as best, model the good faith that, these fascists and, free speech antagonists will never show to others. But we actually stand for truth. We stand for open debate and free inquiry. And so I want to try to model that here and put on give the most good faith that we possibly can here. Because I know that for, fascist right-wing influencers like, Laura Loomer or Borisenko, they have no interest in telling the truth. And people who are kind of so far gone down the internet rabbit hole as they are, we're never going to be able to reach them, frankly. But there are still plenty of people, regular working people, who we can reach and who may believe that, okay, this video that I'm seeing of this professor, it feels like what I've been told, that universities are bastions of anti-American, anti-capitalist, whatever, brainwashing, professors who are teaching our kids to hate America, this is, we hear this a lot. You're in Texas. You must hear it all the time. Yeah. Right. So for anyone who is thinking that, and seeing this speech that you give and they're saying, is he calling for the overthrow of the American government? Is this a violent call for insurrection? Is the anti-capitalism in this speech something that should be outlawed? Is this a perfect example of why tenure shouldn't exist, because it protects, these brainwashing professors, yada, yada, yada. You get the point, right? So for someone who's still kind of in that, swimming in those waters, what would you say that your case actually shows contrary to that conception that they have?
Yeah. I mean, our side largely has the truth on it, and we try to be factually accurate. I mean, that's a little bit longer process to it. And rather than just kind of gaining inflammatory rhetoric, showing a doctored video, not letting people come to their own conclusions with having everything in front of us. And so that's why it doesn't always fit into a nice soundbite. Right. I've largely tried to stay away from social media posts, especially the comment section, where it's just we know the toxic culture that exists in many online spaces. But seeing a few comments oh yeah, they fire that commie trying to indoctrinate the students. I mean, that just goes against everything that I value, both as not only a political activist, but also just an educator. I don't bring my politics into the classroom. I mean, if you teach the history enough as it is, it speaks to itself. If you're teaching history and it's all great and happy and kumbaya, then you're not teaching history correctly. There's a lot of ugly, dark, horrific moments in U.S. history. There's also a lot of moments of triumph and celebration and winning of rights. And so that's something to celebrate. There is a lot of celebratory history in the United States to go along with its dark aspects as well. And so it seems what a lot of people have a problem with is just telling the truth and telling the whole entire picture. And I've had quite a few self-identifying conservative students tell me that they appreciated my class. They're so I don't necessarily agree with some things you might say, even though I'm kind of curious about what those are. Because I try to just stick with the facts and I'm not putting anything out there. But they're yeah, at least I know where you're coming from. I get the perspective and I learn from it. It's I don't always agree with it, but I appreciate that you're also critical of liberalism and conservatism and also critical of socialists at times, critical of anarchists, even though I'm a self-identifying socialist, being critical at mistakes that are made, because that's how I feel students need to learn that critical thinking and analytical thinking skills. And so that's something that's very much needed and often missing in kind of our very kind of like high turnover news cycle. We don't have many spaces like where we have these long discussions like we're having now. We can discuss and go back and forth. So that's why programs like this are so important, as well as classrooms are important as well. That classrooms don't get turned into these like politicized spaces where you can just students, hey, this is what happened. Analyze it. Think for yourself. I mean, that's what I had. I mean, I didn't always agree with my professors as an undergrad at all, but I learned from them. And if I had a disagreement with them, that was actually good. It helped. It meant I had to come up with a counter argument. And if I was going to have that counter argument, I better back it up with facts. And that's what I encourage in my classroom. I've had students that had come saying, I think capitalism's great. And this is in my labor history classes, upper level labor history classes, and the giant surveys. I don't get into that too much, but when we're in like the upper level labor history classes, and they think, I think capitalism's great for working class people. And I'm like, okay, let's dig into it. Let's give your evidence. Let's provide this. Let's say what it is. I mean, let's go through that, and you got to back it up. So that's what it is with any argument. And so that's when we're having universities come under attack, where that type of debate and that discussion. I mean, it hurts everybody. I mean, here it is like saying it's hurting those conservative students that are actually like looking to bolster their arguments on why they believe that capitalism is good. And so it's like, because they don't have that counter. You know what I mean? Yeah, you need to counter that Marxist professor who's going to challenge you on that. Like I encountered my own professors that I was like, okay, this is a challenge now. I got to do this. If I'm going to do this right and make sense, you can't just throw out something, oh, I said this. Okay. Back it up.
And yeah.
Yeah. And so that's what it is. And that's what we need. And I think that's part of what society should be, where you have those different debates. You encounter the libertarian, the Marxist, the liberal, conservative, the unaffiliated, with more of a spiritual beliefs that have influenced their world outview. That's part of it. Let's do that. Let's discuss it. Let's have it all be a mix. But when you limit and cut it down, that's when it really becomes dangerous to society.
Yeah, no, I think that's powerfully and chillingly put. And I think like there's, as you said, like this is not some coming era of repression. Like we're in it.
Yeah.
And what happens next, like the what we write about this era depends on what people of conscience do right now to defend those rights, or let them die. Frankly, that applies as much to academic freedom and free speech on college campuses as it does to free speech in general. Journalism, the ability of people like myself to report the truth of what's happening in a country where policy is being decided on explicit untruth, like the fact that, Portland's a war zone. No, it ain't. My wife's there right now sending me pictures. It ain't a damn war zone. And yet we're sending National Guard troops there on the false premise that it is a war zone. And so, like, you've got to defend truth even when the forces of untruth, lies, obfuscation, propaganda are pushing as hard as they can in the opposite direction. And that's where we are right now. And doing so, like being part of that fight, requires being very, disciplined, careful, measured, intentional with what we say, and having the ability and backbone to back up what we say, what we report as true. Like Professor Alter was saying, it's like, make your claim and then back it up. Like that is the standard to which everyone should be holding themselves and others right now. And I wanted to like just sort of hover on that question for a second, Professor, and ask given everything that we're talking about here, given the incredibly high stakes of this battle over the future of higher education, given the amplified viciousness and even violence of the forces that want to silence people like you, and students like, those that were camping out on their campuses all across the country last year. Given that is the reality in our country in the year of our Lord 2025 right now, what sort of lessons about how to carry oneself still with, again, leaning forward with truth, conviction, but also openness, and a healthy culture of debate and inquiry. What lessons would you want to offer for folks out there who are determined to keep fighting for their rights to speak freely, but also lessons that they should learn about how to not, step into the bear traps that these bad faith, right wing, influencers, politicians, and so on are laying for everybody? Because there is, and I'm speaking for myself here, I'm not speaking for you or anybody else, but I will just say, as a, lefty, grad student who was involved in, organizing and public writing and getting into labor, all that kind of stuff. I was as guilty as anybody else in the left academic world of kind of making, sometimes you get a little, overextended, and you kind of, you make more maximalist statements about, the coming revolution or the need to overthrow capitalism, and what we're describing about the effects of capitalism, the history of the American imperialist state, all of that is true, but still the terms with which we talk about it can be taken out of context and can be weaponized against you if you're not careful. So yeah, you get the point. I just wanted to kind of open that space for a minute to ask if there are any lessons that you've taken away from this about how to maintain the fight for, the things that we are fighting for, while being, cautious, protective, and intentional about how we proceed in these very dangerous times.
Yeah, that's a lot of good points there. I've always kind of gone with be yourself, speak to the truth, and let the other side kind of do themselves in. You don't need to put any words in anyone else's mouth. I honestly don't know what President Dampus was thinking. I don't know. I mean, it happened to happen. My termination happened a few hours after Charlie Kirk's assassination. I don't know if those are directly tied in his mind. I don't know. We can speak to that fact that this is what's going on. And so right now we very much have this on our side. What we say is we can point to those things. My termination happened around with Charlie Kirk. Don't need to imply anything else. It comes in this context. I've always been an advocate of you use your rights or you lose them. Once you start self-censoring, you put yourself in a weaker position. Now, I used my rights and still got terminated. But I think because I was using my rights and people knew who I was and know who I am, I mean, I was known as a Palestinian activist fighting for Palestinian liberation. There was a point in the last school year where I was being quoted every other week in the student newspaper. I was kind of wishing they would quote some other people, because I was like, okay, I was fine with being in there, but it was known that was who I am. So I was always making sure. So if something would happen to me, which I was not trying to provoke, I enjoyed being in the classroom. I like having a paycheck, these things. I wanted to continue activism, not have the struggle be about me directly. I wanted to fight for immigrant rights. I wanted to fight for Palestinians, not having to wage a personal fight for myself, which is a part of a broader fight, of course. It's not just about me. So I've always been advocating for that. You have to use your rights or lose them. Be firm of who you are. There's really not a need to go over the edge and come with inflammatory rhetoric. Now, that being said, I use this term revolutionary socialism. The term revolution. It gets used a lot. Can mean a lot of different things. You'll hear it like a tire company, revolutionary new tire. It's like, okay, I don't think that tire overthrowing capitalism. But you hear
we've revolutionized laundry detergent.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So the term revolution right there. I'm saying revolutionary socialism right there. So there, I mean, it becomes a little bit, how do you explain that and what it means? And I've had to go through that. I mean, I've got a book where I use the term revolutionary socialism, looking at Texas socialists from the early 1900s and their interactions with Mexican revolutionaries. And these kind of Eugene Debs era socialists refer to themselves as revolutionary socialists. That's not always clear for the general public, I must admit. I mean, I was using that term during a socialism conference with revolutionary socialism. So I was at that point speaking to a particular audience and not necessarily in my capacity as a university professor. But what that revolution means is a revolution to get rid of the economic system of capitalism and replace it with socialism. It's not necessarily a violent call, an armed struggle. Even the Communist Manifesto, I said in my talk, our lessons are laid out, our tasks are laid out in the Communist Manifesto. Most people are like, oh, Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels in the Communist Manifesto are not calling for an armed uprising. I mean, they're calling for working class people to engage in struggle. And then with the role of communists, let's connect all those different struggles together to make it one united struggle of the working class. And so, yeah, these are good questions. How do we address this now? Without getting because, yeah, you say our tasks are laid out in the Communist Manifesto. What? It's going to be scary stuff for probably a lot of people. But then what Marx and Engels were talking about were hooking up with the Chartists in England. That was the struggle from the 1830s to 1850s for universal male suffrage and so working class men could have the vote. And they're talking about hooking up with the agrarianists in the United States. Well, those are the anti-slavery people. I'm talking about people going for land reform and for women having the right to vote. So these are pretty basic things. But when you say Communist Manifesto, all kinds of images come to mind. And so, yes. And so that is the difficult question, because I am a socialist, and that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And that is our task. I mean, of where you be true to yourself and to what your politics are, but at the same time, trying to figure out what that means to a lot of different people. Like one of the things I said in my conference talk, just kind of laying with this political climate that we're in right now, I was referring to you have comedians that have gone to Trump rallies and try to get Trump supporters in these gotcha moments, more to laugh at them. I mean, a lot of those, not all Trump supporters. I mean, Trump draws a lot of his support from the middle class, but there's a lot of working class people that support Trump as well, because he uses that populist rhetoric. It taps into the deep economic anxieties that are felt by a lot of working class Americans. So you see this reporter, he's a comedian / reporter going up to a Trump supporter, and they say, why do you support Trump? And they goes, oh, because he's fighting the communist. And they're like, okay, who are the communists? And he goes, the big pharmaceutical companies that control the government. And the comedian's meeting is like, look how stupid these Trump supporters are. Well, I was like, well, actually, that's good that this Trump supporter is against the big pharmaceutical companies controlling the government. He's seeing that, but then he's not understanding what actually he's describing as capitalism, not communism. And so that's the challenge that we have. I mean, ours is much more of the slower education. We're trying to actually educate people and to not indoctrinate them or play to their base fears or divide people along race or ethnicity or sexuality. We're trying to unite people around our common are things that we should have in common. I mean, as working class people. And then, of course, everyone has their individual different struggles. I mean, a transgender person is facing different struggles as a working person than as kind of a straight identifying working class person. And so it's acknowledging all that. It's not easy. It's not easy and all this. I mean, a lot of this it's depending on what your background is and where you're coming from. But it's just being patient with people as well, instead of getting oh no, that stupid Trump supporter. It's like, okay, where are they coming from? And then if they're coming from a place where like white supremacy is where they're coming from, never mind, move on, type of thing. But if where they're coming from is like, oh, the big pharmaceutical companies that are controlling the government, we got a starting point right there. And so that, yes, that is the challenge. I mean, and so where you're true to yourself, true to your political tradition as like a Marxist and as a socialist, but then realizing those are really loaded terms for a lot of people. And so that's a really good discussion. I don't honestly have the exact answers to that. I mean, yeah, it's a difficult question, but it means slowly explain. And that's what this has been opportunity right here for with my case. I've been using it as an opportunity to explain these things. Like, what did you mean by that? What does that mean? What does revolutionary socialism mean? Like, what is tenure? Even get to the academic side, what does tenure mean? What do all these things mean? So it's the discussing them, and I found it's also. I mean, yeah, in my talk, I critiqued a lot of different aspects of things, but people have still they've come together and like this forming, like realizing this is a fight against democratic rights and this is what we can fight around together. And so my talk was one that was kind of critical of different aspects of the left. It was meant for a particular audience right here, has been actually become like a unifying moment. And so that's what I think this has been kind of the more real promising thing that's happening. It's given us a space. I think it wasn't intentional by like the university president to actually explain these things. Like, what do they mean? And to get that, I don't think he platformed a fascist by Borisenko by firing me, but he's also ended up platforming a socialist as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, my profile has risen a little bit more than it was. I was just the simple teaching Texas history and labor history and small town in Central Texas. And then now here I'm on your show.
Here we are. Right. Yeah. This, we call that the Streisand effect, baby. Yeah. Well, and it just like, I couldn't help but think back to like my former self as I was listening to you talk, because as listeners to this show know, like I grew up deeply conservative. I grew up, like believing so many of the like deeply entrenched principles that, my parents raised us with. And I can recall many times giving the knee-jerk conservative refrain of the 90s and early aughts of saying, I disagree with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. That used to be like one of our like stakes of our identity. Like that's what made us, like defenders of free speech and like real patriots, was having that belief. And over the course of my lifetime, I have seen the right that I grew up in thoroughly abandon that. And in fact, like, embrace and adopt its polar opposite. And so, like, any MAGA person or the president himself can tell me that, like, they are not doing that. But I'm like, I know my own experience. I know the world I grew up in. I know what you guys all used to say because I grew up watching you. So don't tell me that, like it's sunny outside when it's raining. Like I know the truth. And I'm not going to like let you convince me that your lies are true. I'm sorry, I'm just not. And sometimes, it needs to just be as basic as that. To anyone listening, to anyone watching, if you're wondering how to navigate this, at most, or at base, you have to be able to say, I know what the fuck is true. I trust my eyes. I trust my ability to determine fact from fiction. I'm going to look into claims and sources and like make that determination to the best of my abilities. Like, but don't let a bunch of bullies, convince you that the obvious lie is true. Because then so much more is going to die in the course of that struggle than just the truth that's right in front of you. Like all the sort of democratic principles, institutions, traditions that rely upon a shared sense of truth to work, those go out the window too. right? If we don't have a sense of shared truth, if we don't have an agreed upon method of determining what's true and what's not, and if we don't have the basic ability and backbone to defend what we know to be true against those who we know to be lying, then more and more will be lost. And it will be harder and harder to stop it. So, like, we don't need to have all the answers here, but, like, I want to at least, like, put in a plug for that. Don't go quietly, into the night. Don't just let, the very existence of truth and the ability to say what's true and what's not die, because you don't want to live in a world where that is gone completely. I know I don't. And so, like, there's so much more that we could be talking about for the next hour, but I know I've got to let you go, man. And I really, really appreciate you taking all this time with us. And I wanted to just, like, round out by sort of bringing us back to where we started, like, where your case stands now. You and your family are still in administrative limbo, as it were, on the, today, as of today, October 11th. So we're going to get this episode out as quickly as we can. And it's very possible by the time you guys who are listening to this hear it, that things may have changed in Professor Alter's case. And so I wanted to just sort of end on this note by asking if you could tell listeners, like, what may happen in the coming days, what they can do to support you, your family, your students, and join the fight to defend, free speech and academic freedom before both are gone completely.
Yes. So in the next day or a couple days, we could be either celebrating a victory that do this, a lot of this grassroots community support and also support from around the country and my not being permanently fired. Or with me being permanently fired, we could be looking at an all-out, basically all-out war fighting, because so many supporters have said, just told me, we cannot lose this fight. Because here, if they were able to, like, fire someone for their socialist politics, engaging in socialist politics in their own free time, that sets an incredibly dangerous precedent. So and this is why it gets so many supporters behind it. I mean, the people are telling me, thank you for fighting. And I say, I'm not just fighting for you. I'm not just fighting for myself. I'm fighting for all of us. And that's where it's really resonated. So we could be celebrating a victory, or we could be looking at a protracted fight around my case. But even if hopefully my case comes out positive, that we are celebrating a victory soon, the fight doesn't stop. Because what we did here at Texas State with the support of the unions, students, academic associations, supporters of free speech, this is what we need to be replicating across the country, and but not all of our universities, within our communities, on campus and off campus as well. And this, especially here in Texas, where unions don't have as much power as they do in other places, it's shown what a union can do. So yes, here at Texas, as public employees, we do not have collective bargaining or the right to strike, but people have seen firsthand what a union can do, how it becomes that basic defensive organization of the working class. So I encourage everyone to join your union, become active in your union as well. A lot of people you're part of the union, but not necessarily active in it. Now's the time to not only join your union, but if you're in a union, it's time to become active in it as well. Also join, or even thinking about whether joining that particular political organization that meant something to you. Join it. It's now's the time to do it. It's been time to do it for a little while, but now it's really coming down to this do or die moment. So and take power in that. Take power in that. I mean, it's take power from each other. That here, it's really empowering when you're out there with fellow working people and fighting for your rights. It's something that really is empowering, and you see the power of the working class. So again, tell people just keep fighting, whether it's around my case. Hopefully it's a victory. If not, going to be fighting still.
All right. right, gang, that's going to wrap things up for us this week. I want to thank our guest, Tom Alter, tenured history professor at Texas State University, who is currently fighting for his job and for academic freedom as such. And of course, I want to thank you all for listening, and I want to thank you for caring. We'll see y'all back here next week for another episode of Working People. And if you can't wait that long, then go explore all the great work that we're doing at the Real News Network, where we do grassroots journalism that lifts up the voices and stories from the front lines of struggle. Sign up for the Real News newsletter so you never miss a story, and help us do more work like this by going to therealnews.com/donate and becoming a supporter today. I promise you guys, it really makes a difference. I'm Maximilian Alvarez. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Solidarity forever.
When my face you no longer see, I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever we go, we're going to roll the Union on the song. I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever hungry are we, just as hungry can be. The song, I live on, yes, I live on. Where mean things are happening in this land, it's read a song, I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever the book mean things are happening in this land is read, I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever the videotape of me is shown, I live on, yes, I live on. If I have help to make this a better world to live in, I'll live on, yes, I'll live on. When my body is silent and in some lonesome grave, I live on, yes, I live on. When my songs and poems are read, I live on, yes, I live on.